Hey guys, I'm Isaac from Chaff Games, and this week we are going to be working on our shotgun. Last year I posted the definitive FPS tutorial around October, and a lot of people asked me, how can I make a shotgun? And I answered that last week with a short little devlog on how I achieved that by refactoring this project. And so today I'm going to show you how you can do that and how to make a shotgun as well. The first half of this I'm going to be going very quickly because it is just refactoring and it's kind of boring. So I'm going to copy and paste a lot of code. It's okay if you don't want to do that. You can just download the project and take that section of the script into yours, or you can follow along with me. But if you want to follow along, I've created a branch on the Godot for FPS template. So I'll be linking this GitHub project, the Godot for FPS template, and I've created this version 1 tree, which is going to be our starting point. So I've rolled it back to the YouTube stage, so this should be close to the end of that tutorial. And so what you can do is you can come over to the releases and you can download that. So it's a snapshot of the project before the shotgun refactor. So you can just click this and download it. If you're using GitHub as well, I'll show you that. So you can open up a terminal or command if you're using Windows, and you can type git clone -b for branch v1. And that's because that's the name of the branch and then the link to the project. So if you do that, you'll clone the project down and it will be there. So this is going to be our starting point if you want to follow along. I'm going to come over here to Godot and I'm going to go and import that project. So GitHub projects. So I'll just navigate to that. It's going to be under shotgun tutorial for me, and we will import and edit. So if you're downloading this from GitHub, definitely make sure that everything's running properly. You'll have to go through this import process first. It shouldn't give you too many issues on Godot 4.2. So I've got ignoring faces, non-infant normal. I don't think that's a problem. Give it a run and make sure it works. We can see that we can point and shoot and things react. Everything's here. We've got the projectile weapons as well. We can drop these. So we're all working as expected. Okay, so now we can actually start refactoring our weapon manager. So one of the key aspects that I pointed out in my devlog last week was that the weapon manager's primary goal is to control the actions of the weapon and also manage what the current weapon is. And on top of that, at the moment, we're also dealing damage, we're creating raycasts and all those other things. So we need to probably split some of these things out so you can sort of see that, okay, maybe controlling what the current weapon is and the actions it can take makes sense to keep that contained in the weapon manager because it manages the weapon. But potentially, we don't want to do the raycasting and the damage dealing within the weapon manager. So what I'm talking about here is for the action. So under input, we've got if event.isActionPressShoot. And obviously we shoot, excuse me, and we'll come down to that. And we've got a bunch of checks to make sure the animation player isn't running, and then play the shoot animation, reduce ammo. All that stuff can stay because it's mostly around performing the action. But once we come to actually doing the raycast here and then passing that on to the hit scan on the projectile section, we want to move that to a new class that can handle that all for us, and then we'll be able to create a shotgun without needing to add another weapon type, essentially, current weapon.type. If you weren't going to refactor, you might need to consider doing another match here for a shotgun weapon, and then if you wanted more variants, you'd have to add them below. It goes on and on and on. So refactoring is definitely the answer. So let's get started to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is come down to the player controller under scripts. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it projectile. So projectiles. And within that, I'm going to create a new script. And this one is going to inherit node 3D. And we'll take the template, that's fine, and we will create that built-in script. I don't want to call it new script, so I'll call it projectile. Or maybe just projectile singular. And we'll create that. Okay, and we'll open that up. You can just double click there. We don't need process. I'll keep ready around, and we'll first of all create a class name, and we'll call this projectile. This will create a couple of conflicts in our weapon manager, but we're going to delete them anyway. So don't worry too much about that. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we're going to be repeating that we've done already. So if you've never created a hit scan weapon and this is your first time because you were looking to create a shotgun as your first weapon, definitely go back and watch either the hit scan tutorial that I've made or follow the full weapon manager tutorial, because that leans heavily on this. I might create another tutorial down the line for a standalone shotgun so you don't have to have the prerequisite course. But for now, I'm going to be moving pretty quickly and copying and pasting in a lot of stuff. I'll explain any changes that I've made to the code along the way. First thing I'm going to add is the hit successful signal. This is very similar to the rigid body script that we had previously, because we need to know basically if the hit has been successful and communicate that back to the HUD. Okay, so we've got our classic enum here for the projectile type, and this will either be a hit scan or a projectile. I keep thinking I want to rename this to rigid body projectile because that's clearer. So that will be renamed to rigid body projectile, just so it's a little bit clearer as to what it is. We'll have the projectile velocity. This will be for the rigid body projectile in case we are shooting it. We're going to have an expiry time just in case we're spawning in this projectile class and it doesn't do anything or connect with anything. We need to delete it after a while. Okay, we're going to have a bool to display a debug decal. That's just our classic red X that I've been dropping in when you like make a collision with the initial raycast. Okay, we'll paste in our export file for the rigid body projectile. That'll be a pack scene, but it'll need to be a rigid body 3D for this to work. So just keep that in mind. I'm not sure you can do typing on a pack scene. If you can, let me know, because I'd love to know how that works or how to code it in. Okay, so next we need to bring in the debug bullet, which is just the red cross that we're going to spawn if we collide with something with our raycasts. So moving on, we have got our damage that we're going to need to bring in. This is going to be set to 0 and it's going to get fed information from the actual weapon manager on how much damage to do. And then we've also got this projectile spawned array. So if we're firing a rigid body projectile and it collides with something, we want to delete just that projectile. In the case of firing multiple projectiles, like the shotgun. So now that we've got all of that, I'm going to quickly create a very simple function down here called onTimerTimeout. And in the ready function, I'm going to call getTree.createTimer. I'll pass in that expiry time of 10 seconds, .timeout.connect, and then I'll use the callable onTimerTimeout. So what all this does is just tells the timer to use the expiry time of 10 seconds. If nothing's happened since then, we're just going to delete this node so it doesn't hang around. So this could even really be shorter because bullets normally fly pretty quickly. 10 seconds is pretty generous. It's really important for physical projectiles. If you miss, they might go on for quite a while and you don't want them to just disappear. But 10 seconds is a very long time. Okay, so the next thing we're going to bring in is the camera raycast. Now this is a function that we've written a couple of times already on my channel. So I'm going to paste this in here. We've got the function camera raycast. We've got a new variable here. I don't think we've had this before in any videos, but if you've downloaded some of my projects, you would have seen it as spray. I've renamed it to spread. So this is a variation from the center of the camera. So normally when we're doing a camera raycast, we're firing it straight at the center of the camera. You know, we're using this here to get the camera, and then we're using the viewport to get the size, and we're dividing it by 2. So it's always going to be the center. But now we can pass in some spread, and it's actually going to get added to the end of the ray. So that might actually be off from center, essentially. So that's how you get your spray. It's how we're going to do the shotgun spread. And we're still multiplying that by the range, which is by default 1,000 meters. So that is pretty much stock standard. Something that did come up a lot in the tutorial is that this doesn't work if you're using a customized project window size. So if you've got your project settings set up to be viewport and using some sort of retro resolution, then you need to use getWindow.getContentScale or something like that. Let me just look that up for you. Get window, get content scale size so that you can get the correct center of the window. I haven't found a way to get both, so it's always the center. If you do know a way, let me know. It would be helpful. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so moving on, we've got our ray origin. You guys should all be familiar with this at the moment. That's the center of the screen, and the end of the ray is the ray origin plus the projection of the normal times the range. So that's 1,000 meters in this case if you didn't pass anything in, off the normal. And we're adding that spread to that vector as well, so that can just be like deviated a little bit to the left or right or whatever you want. I find this is the best place to add this in, but you can also do it in the next stage if you wanted to. It just requires more math. Okay, so then we're creating an intersection. Pretty straightforward here. We're passing in the ray origin and the ray end. This is different from what I was doing in the tutorial. I used an exclude array, but I've since decided to sit down and learn how this collision mask works. So we'll show you how to set that up. This counts from the back. So this first one here is the first layer. So if you look at any physics body, you know, they've got these layers here. So this one here is always going to be the first one. This is the second one, third one, fourth one. Fifth is going to be clear. That's where we're going to put our rigid body projectiles now. So I'll set up a new layer under the project settings, and under 3D physics here, I will put rigid body projectiles. Okay, moving on. We've got our intersection, and if we have an intersection, we return the collider. This is all pretty standard. You guys should know this stuff. All right. So now that we've got that, we can bring in the next function, which is going to be our hit scan collision. And I'll also bring in the hit scan damage at the same time, because they sort of are exactly the same as you've seen them in the previous. Okay, so hit scan collision, we pass in the array, we pass in the damage this time because we can't just get that from the weapon manager. So that'll get passed in from our main function. This is pretty much exactly the same how you see it in the weapon state machine or the weapon manager that I created. So if you come down to this, we've got hit scan collision, we've got hit scan damage. These are all exactly the same, but in the projectile, it's just a little bit neater, and we're obviously using the damage that's going to get passed in rather than using something directly from the weapon manager. Okay, loading decals. Now that was originally done, I think just inline here in the camera collision. That's kind of gross. So I've created a function on its own. So now we're going to load the decal, and we can load it at that hit scan collision, which is going to be the camera collision essentially. So now all that's left is we want to load a projectile, a rigid body projectile, if we have one. I might want to consider separating this out later, I think. But for now, this is where it's going to be. And it's pretty much the same. We're going to instantiate that pack scene. We're going to add it as a child. We're going to add it to the projectile spawned array. And then obviously we're going to connect a signal on body entered. I need to add that in. So that's just going to sit here. I'm going to grab that now and paste that in here. So this, we're going to add this body entered rigid body signal, and we're going to connect it to this function on body entered. And so that's gonna do the calculations to see if this is a target, and if it's got the method hit successful, obviously we're gonna emit the signal. We're going to add the decal at the point that that position collided. We're going to delete that particular projectile from existence. We're going to queue it free, and then we're going to remove it from the array of projectiles that were spawned. And if that array is empty, we're going to delete the entire projectile so that we don't have to wait for the timer to time it out. Okay. So yeah, we add that signal. We get its direction as we have done in the past, and we normalize it. We set it as top level. My projectiles are normally set up as top level, but just in case, we want to set that as top level so it doesn't follow the player around. And then we're going to set the linear velocity of that projectile, multiplying it by the direction, multiplied by the projectile velocity. Okay, all pretty straightforward stuff. And next, I believe we just need to add the last two functions. The first one is going to be fire projectile. I'm actually going to add this towards the top. You can put it anywhere you like. Okay, so I've got this function fire projectile. Now this does most of the work. It takes the spread, it takes the range, and it takes a projectile, which will be the projectile on this project, but it could be theoretically something else. I'm keeping it open. So it takes that, and what it does is it does the camera raycast, and then it will either pass on that information to the hit scan collision or the rigid body projectile function. Okay, but we need to have a way of calling this. So the way that we interface with our weapon manager is going to be with this function here, underscore set projectile. Now we're going to receive some damage, we are going to be receiving some spread, we're going to be receiving some range. We're going to set the damage equal to the damage. So this is this variable here, and it's going to underscore damage is going to come from the weapon manager, and then we're just going to pass on all that information to fire projectile. The reason I've separated these two is so that we can override this class and do different things if we want to. All we need to know is that the weapon manager is calling this function set projectile. So I believe we've got everything now. Let me just double check. Now let's jump back into the state machine. It's called weapon state machine. I often call it the weapon manager, and this is where we've been doing most of our work. Now we do need to remove all of those functions that we have in here. So that's going to include things like remove collision. You can also leave them in if you don't want to. Launch projectile. I'm pressing Control K, by the way, to automatically comment these out. I won't delete them straight away. I'll comment them out, make sure that I've got everything working, and then I might consider deleting them. That's generally how I do it with these things. Camera collision, we don't need that anymore. This is actually going to break quite a lot of functionality within the weapon manager, because the camera collision is also used for the melee attack. And so we'll need to address that too, but I'll take care of that at the end of this video. Okay, animation finished, obviously we keep, and then we've come back up to the melee. Obviously melee is no longer going to work, so I am going to just comment this section of it out because that's the part that's wrong. And then we've come back all the way up to shoot, and we just comment that out. And now realistically, I should be able to run the game, and I just won't be able to shoot. Still drop weapons, I can still drop weapons. And when I press shoot, obviously the animation plays, but nothing happens. Every piece of functionality is still the same. Our ammo is going down. We've got this. It's just not doing anything, so we need to add that back. So this is where we'll slow it down a little bit. We will stop just pasting things in, and we'll just sort of go through this to create our shotgun. We've got to get back to square one first. So the very first thing that we're going to do is essentially just create a new function here where we go load projectile. I might capitalize that. Load projectile. And we will pass in the spread. If we got it, I'll create a variable here. We won't have any spread yet. That's going to be in a different video. So I'll just create a spread here, and it'll be a vector 2, 0, and we'll address that later. That's exciting. Okay, and we'll create a function here. Load underscore projectile. And it'll take a spread, I'll just underscore spread, lowercase, underscore spread. So I'll go var underscore projectile, make it small. And I'm actually going to say that this is a projectile so that we can get the IntelliSense on this. And it's going to need to come from the current weapon, projectile to load. We're going to repurpose that variable. And we'll call instantiate on it to load it in. Bullet point is still going to be used because that's where we want to actually put the projectile physically in this space, so that we don't need to know where it is. We just assume that we're in the right place, so that when we're doing our second raycast, we just do it from the current position of the projectile. And we'll add a child and we'll make it the underscore projectile. And then the other function that we've used before, not function, but add signal to HUD.emit, and we'll pass underscore projectile again. And then finally, we can go underscore projectile dot set projectile. It's all the way down here, but it's there. And now it's telling us we need to pass in the damage, so we can pass in current weapon dot damage. It wants a spread, so we can pass in the spread that we just created, even though it doesn't do anything. And it wants the range. And we'll go current weapon dot fire range. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here. Now we also need to work on the resource. So I'm gonna pull that up. Give me a second. I believe it's under weapon state machine. We've got the resources. Weapon resource.gd, here we go. So open this up. We obviously need to remove a couple of variables here, like projectile velocity, we no longer need that. And we also no longer need to know whether or not it's a hit scan or a projectile weapon, but we do still want to keep projectile to load because at the end of the day, this is what we're going to pass in with the projectile. So we need to create projectile scene and then add it to this so that we can actually finally start using our hit scan weapons again. Okay, so let's create a new scene, and I'm just gonna type in here projectile, and it's there. Obviously, we're gonna start with hit scan. We don't need a velocity, expiry time can stay the same. In fact, it doesn't really need anything. So I'm gonna save this, and we could almost probably create it via code, to be honest, but that's a bit high level and it's kind of annoying, so I am just gonna do it this way. Spawnable objects, and I'm going to create a folder for projectiles, and I'm going to call it projectiles to load, and this one I'm just going to call basic hit scan projectile. Okay, and I'll come back over to the player character here. I'll click on this. I'll access my resources via the weapon manager node. I'll actually click on the weapon resources and I'll come down to these. And they've been organized nicely. We've got animations, we've got stats, and then we've also got these behavior can be dropped, weapon to drop, and then obviously projectile to load. So we'll find that folder under spawnable objects, projectiles to load, basic hit scan. And I'll save that. And then we should just add that for the two weapons that were hit scanned before. I believe that was Blaster I and L, and N. Let's just double check because I can't remember. Blaster N, oh, is that one? Blaster I is the assault rifle, which will both hit scan, and then Blaster L was the projectile. So Blaster L needs to have a special one. I'm lost. So delete projectile to load. It already had one. And so Blaster N can be basic. So if I save this and run, let's see if it actually works for the hit scan weapons. And it does, look at that. Pretty much back to square one. If this doesn't work for you, just go back through and have a look at the refactor. If you're having trouble, you can always download the project and just scrape the entire script off that. That might be an easier way to do it. Of course, like I said, I think I'm going to do a standalone, so that's a little bit easier to digest, because at this point we're 12 episodes into a series and it's kind of hard for people to understand exactly what's going on. Sometimes it's even hard for me to remember because I'm so far ahead. Okay, so let's create a rigid body projectile for the Blaster L. I'm going to create a new scene and it'll be a projectile as usual. So this one's going to be a rigid body projectile. I'll give it a velocity. I'll keep it pretty low at 50. Expiry time's fine, display debug. And so now it needs the rigid body projectile. And we can pretty much use the old one that we had. We do need to make some changes to it because it had a timer, it had a script. Now this script is pretty much depreciated at this point. We don't need to use it because our other hit scan is doing everything for us. I mean, I guess there's an argument to say that you could just load this up and not do all the other stuff on the other script, but I guess like it's one of those things that it might need to be that way in the future, but for now it feels easier, or it feels better to do it in that script alone rather than offloading it to the rigid body, just in case we need to do something custom to it. I don't know, like, just give me one of the things. We'll play it by ear as the project evolves. Okay, so I'm gonna remove the script and I'm gonna remove the timer. And I'm gonna save that. And this will be just your basic 3D rigid body. Pretty much everything needs to remain the same. We do need to change the layer that it's on. So now it needs to be moved to layer 5. So we do wanna move this to layer 5 because, as you might remember, in the projectile script, I set the collision mask to not read on that layer. So we're going to create an entirely new layer like we did, rigid body projectiles, and so that won't collide with anything except for objects and the world, and then potentially more down the line if you want it to. But now we can come back to our unsaved projectile and we can drag that rigid body projectile in here. Now it's got everything that we need, so we can go basic rigid body projectile and save that, and then come back over to the weapon manager, and for Blaster L, it requires a projectile to load, so now we can get the basic rigid body projectile in here and we can drop that in, and let's see how we're doing. That's interesting. Let's pick that up. And it's working. Now it's not interacting with the box, and I do know why that is. It is because in the world here, and is that under enemies? No, it's just box. This box, if I open up this scene, does need to have that mask on the 5 there for it to actually interact with it, otherwise it won't. So anything you want your rigid body to interact with needs to mask it, otherwise it will collide with it, but it won't affect it. Okay, and now you can see it reacting to that, which is great. And it's killing these objects, and it's not being affected by my body. I just like to make sure that nothing I'm doing physically is manipulating the bullet. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so we've made it all the way back. Our project is working as normal. And now we can finally make a shotgun. I know it's been a long road, guys. I've been recording for a while now. It's been 50 minutes. So hopefully I'll cut this down a lot so that you guys don't have to sit here and listen to me just refactor a project that, you know, just to make a freaking shotgun. Okay, so now that we've done all that, we can finally make a shotgun. We need to create another weapon model and animate all of that. We might skip past this, but if you've got a shotgun, feel free to animate it. Okay, and we're back, and I've fast forwarded to the next day because I got kind of tired. Anyway, I have entered in the animations for all the different movements that we're going to need. So we've got like a shooting animation, we've got a reload that kind of looks like a shotgun reloading. I'm not the best animator, so you know, we'll just roll with these just for demonstration purposes. So I've just skipped ahead and done that off camera because it's kind of boring, plus you guys know how to do animations. So we'll skip to creating a new weapon resource, just in case you haven't done that in a while, or maybe this is your first time looking at it. Come over to where it says cameraman, camera weapons manager here. And we've got the weapons resource, which is an array of weapon resources. And I am going to add an element here, and I'm just going to go new weapon resource, which is something that we created way back in our like first or second video, I can't even remember. And we've got the weapon name, and this is going to be lowercase blaster m. The pickup animation, so I'm just going to go through and enter these in. Really speed this part up because it's kind of annoying. Blaster m. Weapon stats, that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to give this shotgun 6 rounds. The reserve ammo for this particular thing, I'm just going to make it 24. The magazine holds 6, and the max ammo, we'll just make that 24 as well. Damage can be 1, melee damage can be 1, autofire obviously is not on, and the fire range, we'll just make it 100 meters. The weapon can be dropped. I also created a rigid body blaster M with the script that we created. What's the name of this script? Weapon pickup. So you just got to attach your weapon pickup to that rigid body. Obviously it's got a name of blaster M, it's 6, it's 24. And I dropped that into the world, so now we should be able to go and pick that up, and it should just be behaving like a regular single shot weapon. So we can pick it up, and it's crashing. What's wrong? It needs a projectile. We just changed that and I forgot to add it. So let's come back in to our weapon resource. We didn't get that far down, so it can be dropped. What can it be dropped? I got a bit distracted. And then I'll look for blaster M. Oh, that didn't come up, but I know where it's kept. Blaster, it's _M for spawnable objects. That's where I saved it. So I'll drop that for weapon drop, and then the projectile, I'll make that a hit scan projectile. I just feel like it looks better for shotguns because you expect it to be really immediate. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. That looks good. And so now it's working like a regular weapon. Obviously it's not a shotgun yet. And the other thing that we're going to need to do at some point is make it so that each tick of this reload reloads 1 instead of waiting for the reload animation to end and reloading all 6 at the end of the animation, because that's not normally how they work in games. Okay. So you should sort of have a good idea of where I'm going with this now. We've got our projectiles that we can drop in, so we need to create a new projectile, and this will be just a 3D node. This time it's not going to be, I'm not going to add a projectile, and I'm going to call this shotgun projectile. And I am going to create a script, and I'm going to save this under player controller scripts, projectiles, and this one can just be called shotgun projectile. I'll create that, and this will, instead of extending node 3D, will extend projectile. Okay, so we'll keep the ready, we'll delete the process. So what we want to do, and this is sort of like just something that I like to do when I'm working with spray patterns or anything like that. They can be random. You could just pick like a radius and just make random points within that, but I prefer to draw it myself. And then if I want it to be specific and fixed, it can be that way. So what I like to use is a path 2D. So I'll add that, I'll give it a name. Shotgun pattern. And so if I come into 2D here, just around the origin, I can draw some points. I like at least one to be close to the center. It doesn't have to be exact, but you know then at least one of these shots will be in the center of the reticule, so that at the very least they'll get one shot off. And then we need 9 to 12, because that's sort of the rough number that people put in a buckshot shotgun shell. It could be more, it could be less, but it's just, you know, it's up to you. So I'm going to count these out because it can be a bit hard to track how many there are. So I'm going to count 1. And the other thing to remember as well, that it actually, and this is probably a very specific one, you want it to be pretty small. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll go one more. And then we'll come up to this options panel here and we'll change it to select points. So for this one, I'm going to get a little bit creative because I've been drawing these for a while now. And make it like kind of zigzaggy. Because I've been watching so many real life shotgun videos, gun videos, just to get a better idea. Being from Australia, gun culture doesn't really exist here. You have to be a special kind of person to be into that. So like I have to learn a lot about how these things work in real life because I really haven't had an experience with them, only in video games. So I'm just going to draw that sort of, let's cluster them up here. Just do what you feel like. Anyway, so that's my shotgun pattern that I've drawn. That I can use to create all these points for our spread in our set projectile function. I'll come back up here and this one, but I'm just gonna control click and drag that shotgun pattern in. And I'm also going to export, I'm gonna export range from 0 to 20. And this will be called randomness. And this will equal 10. So this will just be a little slider. I'm gonna save this scene, projectiles to load, shotgun projectile scene. And so this will just show up here and you can sort of, should be a float. It'll just be something that you can drag, and if you want more random spread pattern or a less random spread pattern, you can sort of drag that. Obviously this is going to be a hit scan weapon, so we don't need to worry about velocity or a physical projectile load. But what we want to do is then finally create a variable called spray vector. Okay, so in the ready, what we're going to do is we're going to go spray vector. Why isn't it coming up? Because I spelled it wrong. Spray vector. And we're gonna say equal to spread pattern, shotgun pattern dot get curve, which is just gonna be a set of points. And that's all we're going to do. We need to continue with the projectiles ready function here. So this is something you need to be aware of if you're overriding functions. There is already something happening in the ready. So what you need to do after this, if you want that other ready to happen that's within the class, is to type return super dot underscore ready. And that'll make sure that what we've written here in the projectile class, I should make this a bit bigger for you guys, will get called as well, so that'll still bring out the timer. Not that it matters for the hit scan weapon, but it's still worth knowing that. And then the only thing we have to do is override the set projectile function. So I'll call that here I was hoping it would fill it in for me, but it hasn't, so I'm just going to copy and paste because I don't want to get the name wrong. My typing has been really bad lately. And also all of this as well. Thank you very much. Okay, and we'll just type pass to make it get happy. So we'll override that function and we can do our shotgun thing. So obviously not much is going to change. We still want to set damage to equal to underscore damage. We're going to pass that on. Next, what we want to do is loop through the points in the spray vector. So I'm going to go for point in spray vector dot get point count. And then we'll create another variable here. We'll say var spray point, var spray point is equal to spray vector dot get point position. And we'll pass in that integer point. Okay. Now we want to do the randomness. So what we can do is we can go spray point dot x, and this is kind of annoying me a little bit. So I'm going to say vector 2 so that it knows what it is. X, thank you very much, is equal to spray point dot x plus rand f range and we'll go negative randomness to randomness. So nice little simple, nothing really fancy about the randomness in this. We're just going to be adding that a little bit of extra or less depending on how we want it to fire. So there's other ways you could do it. You could do it with noise, but then it would be the same every time. If you want it to be different every time, you sort of like, this is a way you can do it. It's not super effective. You can also call randomize, so it'll be different every time. Randomize, so that it won't be the same when you run the game next. Cool. Okay, so now we've got it. We should be good to go after that. I will call fire projectile and we'll pass in the spray point and we'll pass in the range. It's just going to be that range. And then we'll also pass on the rigid body projectile, even though we don't have one, it's still needed. So rigid body projectile. Okay. That should be it. Let's see how it looks when we run the game. If I can pick this bad boy up, okay. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Actually put it on the weapon. Okay, so I'll come back over to our player character. I'll jump onto the weapon manager and I'll click the new weapon that we created. Obviously, its projectile is just the basic hit scan. We can come in here and we can drag on that shotgun. Okay, let's run the game again, see how we look. How's that? That's pretty cool, right? And then that's that easy, it's a shotgun. Problem solved. There's a couple of things I think we could do here. Perhaps we want to, and I'll make it an export variable, split damage. And this is really like, it could go either way. You could set up your damage so that you're only going to give the shotgun like a damage of 1 and your other weapons do like 10, so that you know that hey, my shotgun shoots 9 projectiles, so it's getting pretty close to the same amount of damage as a single bullet, or maybe it does 2, so that like when you get every single one of the points, the hit scan points on a target, it's gonna do like twice as much damage as a regular bullet. I don't know, 3 times as much, but it's kind of easier to, in my opinion at least, maybe it's just because I'm a dum-dum, to split the damage. And if you come over to this, you go, okay, well, it's a shotgun, it shoots 9 points, its damage should realistically be 10, and that's gonna get split among the 9 points so that, you know, they do more, so then it gets split damage here. So damage will actually be needing to change here. It won't just be equal to damage. What I'm gonna do is something a little bit tricky and write here in brackets, max spray vector dot get point count, which is the same as down here, and I'm gonna be lazy and just copy and paste it. Dot get point count multiplied by, and we'll type float, and this will just convert the split damage bool into a float, so it's either going to be 0 or 1, depending on whether or not you've selected that. And then obviously the other side of that, comma 1. Really didn't need to put brackets on the outside of that. Anyway, and then just for the sake of, I'm going to do a print out here, just print the damage. I'm going to pick this bad boy up, and it does 1.1 damage per hit, which will still kill one of these things because I think they only take 1. Let's jump into the world, and enemies, targets. They don't even have an option, they don't even have health. Let's just fix that here and make this an export variable. If I do it properly, export, and just make it like, I guess 2 for the demonstration of this. Doesn't need to be any more than that. So now, that one died because 3 thingos hit it. Let's see if I can, okay, so that one there you can see, and now it took 2 shots to kill it. Okay, we're gonna have to fix that reload business next. Okay, but you see what I'm getting at here. And now if I get up real close and personal, they're all gonna die no matter what, because I'm doing 9 damage to them. So it becomes a pretty lethal weapon at close range. It's like 10x a pistol, but at a distance, sort of like around here, you know, you're struggling because the pattern's always a little bit different. Okay, let's delete that printout. So that is that. So let's take a look at the way the reloads are working at the moment. This happens in the weapon manager script. You can just sort of come down here and click reload if you're looking for it, or you can just look with your eyes. It's really up to you. So basically how this current works is says that if your ammo is, if your current ammo is full, we're not going to do a reload, and also we make sure there isn't another animation already playing. And then if you're not equal to 0 in your reserve ammo, you can just queue that animation, or it's going to play the out of ammo, depending on that. And so what happens is, in our animation finished, we do a check for reload, and then we calculate the reload. So once that animation is done, we calculate the reload, which does, you know, min, max, yada, yada, yada. So what I'm going to suggest here is, in the resource, we're going to create a variable under weapon behavior, and it's going to be an export variable. And I think I'll just call it incremental underscore reload. I think that's the best way to describe it, bool, and it's actually going to be set to false by default. I think that is the default, but we'll do that anyway. So if you come back to all of these, they'll all be set to false, but for the Blaster M, our shotgun, we do want it to be an incremental reload. And then in the weapon state machine, we actually don't want at the end of this animation, I suppose it wouldn't matter because we'd be full anyway, but what we want to do is, let me just find that, on animation finished, if, and the animation is the reload animation, we calculate the reload, right? But I'm also gonna do a check to say if not current weapon dot incremental reload, incremental, I better check the spelling on that 'cause I'm skeptical I spelt it right. And then I'll say calculate reload. So that'll work for everything else. I just copy that and make sure that I've definitely spelled it right. So if we run the game now, every other weapon should work as normal. So I'll run this down, reloads just fine. But this bad boy, we have to shoot. It has a really low fire rate, but it's got shotguns, that's normal. So now, sorry to make you sit through this for demonstration, this actually won't work anymore. See, it says 0 up the top in the left-hand corner there. So what we're gonna do, and you might have another way of wanting to do this, but I think it's the best way to do this is unfortunately the manual way, because ultimately I want the animation of each bump. Here, let me go to 3D and bring up the reload. So if you're watching this, where it sort of jostles, I want an increment to come up. So I'm just gonna follow these and I'm gonna add a track, and it's gonna be a core method track. And we're gonna go to the weapon manager, and I'll just get in close. So this is where I'm gonna put it. On this center one here, I'm gonna insert key, and it's gonna be calculate reload. And then we can go to this, and the way I've set this particular animation up is that it's very repetitive, so I can see at every single instance of this, we're gonna do a reload. If you're gonna do this the same way as I am, try to make it so that you know how much ammo your shotgun takes, and only call this method the amount of times that it needs to be called, essentially. So I've got six rounds in my shotgun, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna go 5, and I'll duplicate the key again. And last one here, I'll duplicate the key. So now that's gonna be called 6 times. So let's come back into the weapon manager, and we'll find that calculate reload function. Let's make this more readable. Oh, it's a big one. I might have to pop this bad boy out. So what we want to do is we want to create a new variable called mag amount. And this is going to be equal to the current weapon.magazine. We're just going to replace this variable here. So any point that you see this in the reload amount, which is these 2 points here, we're going to replace with that, because it's going to take over, and now we're going to be able to set it to anything we want after we've declared it. So I'll go if current weapon dot incremental reload mag amount is equal to the current weapon dot current ammo plus 1. So the mag amount is always going to be reloading 1 greater than it, than it needs, essentially. So it's going to go up by 1 every single time, which is what we want. And then last but not least, what we also want to do is escape from this if we reach 0. So the next thing that we need to check is if the current weapon is, if the current weapon's current ammo is equal to the current weapon.magazine, then just to exit out. And I'm gonna play an animation. In this case, I'm gonna play the out of ammo animation because it just rocks back and forth. And I'll jump over to this to figure out how to spell it. And I'll paste that in, and then I'll type return. The reason for this is because because we are sort of like circumnavigating the magazine calculation here, and if we're incrementally reloading it, we're just making it one greater than the next, then it will continuously add that +1 no matter what. So what we need to do is just do an extra check at the start of this to say, hey, is your current animo matching the magazine amount? If it is, stop playing this animation and play something else. So you could also just like fast forward the reload animation to the end. That could also be an option. It's probably a good way to do it. If we look at animation, custom from end, blah, blah, blah. So like if you knew the skip, so you could also use seek and set update only to true. Methods, audio, and animation playback tracks will not be processed. Seeking to the end of an animation does not emit animation finished. If you want to skip the animation and emit this signal, use animation mixer.advance. Okay. This is new in Godot 4.2 because it inherits animation mixer so that we can call the function advance. What does that do? Manually advances by the specific time in seconds. Okay. So that's an option that we could explore. Current animation dot length. So let's see if we can achieve this in real time. We go var nim length. I can never spell length. Animation player dot get current animation length, and then go dot advance, and then a nim length, and then maybe you could subtract a certain amount. You can multiply it by 90 or something like that so that it's 90% towards the way end. I don't know how that's going to look. We're just freestyling at this point. Let's have a look. Okay. It's not horrible. So that is probably a cleaner solution. And then realistically, if you knew, let's say if you were actually doing this and say, you can't see me because I don't have my camera on, but you've got the pump at the end of your shotgun and you knew where that was on the animation player, you could advance towards the end of that and play that. So that's really cool that we have that now from the animation mixer. Manually advances by the specified time in seconds. Nice. And it doesn't obviously process anything. Obviously I'm returning out of the function, so it would never anyway. It's not something that we have to worry about. I'm just trying to think. What was the seek? So that seek was the other function. Seeks the animation to the seconds point in time. If update is true, the animation updates too, otherwise it updates at process time. Events between the current frame and the seconds are skipped. I don't know, it sounds more complicated. Yeah. Seeking to the end of an animation does not emit. Animation finished. If you want to skip the animation and emit the signal. More research is required. But I think that's fine for now. What happens if I just make this animation length? Or do I even need to pass in anything? Advanced delta. Manually advances specified time, brackets in seconds. I don't know. I don't know, bro. Good enough for me. And it doesn't continuously reload. So, you know, we'll roll with that. It's a little bit cleaner than what I had in my notes, so I'm happy with that. The next thing on my list of things that we need to address is something that's very typical with shotguns. I'll run the game again. Let's pick this up and fire some bullets. Just empty out this. And normally you can interrupt here. I'm clicking my mouse button. Normally you can interrupt the reload sequence of a shotgun. So what we can do is, if the animation is not playing, so when we shoot, what we can do, only if we're gonna shoot, like if we're out of ammo, we don't want to be able to skip the animation. But we can also go is if animation, no, so if current weapon dot incremental underscore reload, then we can just stop the animation player dot stop, and then it won't be playing and this section will be true. So let's, whoa, okay. That was a bit crazy. Gave us the ability to skip the animation altogether. So I got a bit ahead of myself there. Let's just check my notes. We also want to check if it's just the animation. Okay, so we're on the right track, and animation player dot current animation is equal to current weapon dot reload, and dot reload NM. And so that's a bit long. Let's punch this out. So both of those conditions need to be true. We only want to be able to stop the animation if we are reloading. Okay, so round two. Let's give that a go. And pick up. Okay, I can no longer just fire rapidly. That was a pretty cool thing though. Okay, let's have a look. And now I can interrupt it, which is exactly what we want. That's great. And that's pretty much the shotgun. Now, it did break melee, so at the moment, let's have a look at that. That's the last thing I think we need to do, and then you guys can scurry off and make your own games. So where is melee on this list? So we've got the get current animations. If it's equal to shoot, then we obviously don't, but it can interrupt the reload, right? So now it just plays the animation, it doesn't do anything. And I'm actually gonna make a pretty big change here. If we jump into 3D, what I think would work well, because before we were just doing a single ray cast, and that did work, but one thing that I didn't really like about it was that you had to be dead on center to get the hit, and a lot of games don't really work that way. So we can use a shape cast, I think, rather than a single ray cast. And we'll probably be able to animate the size if you want to, along with the animation, if that makes sense. I'm not gonna do that because I'm lazy as hell, but you can if you want to. So what I'm gonna do is, in the weapon manager, I'm gonna create a shape cast, 3D, and it requires a shape. New separation, new box shape. We'll go with box, and it's not going to be casting to -1. It's going to be casting to Z -1 out there, and it's entirely way too big. So let's jump into the main camera here, and we can't see nothing. So let's just reduce the size of the shape cast. And we're also going to give it a name as well, as before we do anything else, the melee hitbox. And the one is way too big, and that's like way too generous. So it's just out in front of us. Like so. It probably doesn't need to be that far in front, maybe 0.5. Let's have a look. It obviously needs to be at a point further out than the collision shape. So if you look well, let's just reset that. If you look side on here, you can see the collision shape of the character. You're not going to be able to get any closer than that, so it does need to be out in front of that. So let's just do it by 0.65. Let's make it negative 0.7. It'll push back from memory. They like move in accordance with their collision. So that's really nice. The size, well, that's really kind of arbitrary. Something like this. Make it generous. The player doesn't have the ability to see it. And so like if I run a melee attack and have a look at where it's going to cover, you can sort of see that it doesn't really mimic that. So what you could do if you wanted to is you could actually animate this and say like, this is the size, it comes down here, we're gonna, that's a Z, we're gonna animate that so the hitbox is like there, where it should be. You could do that, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna have it static in the center of the screen, which is gonna mean that you're gonna be able to hit a lot more with your melee attack, which is good, I think. The weapon manager will need to get access to that. I'll create an export variable that will give us the ability to change this or whatever the heck you want to do with it. So we'll create a melee underscore hitbox, and that will be a shapecast 3D. Okay, and we'll press save, and then it says, hey, where's my shapecast 3D? And then we double click on that. Okay, great. So now we've got that. Let's pop this out and write some code, like real boys. We'll come down to melee and you know, it's kind of interesting. There's almost like an argument to say that you could just spawn another fire projectile. You could create a melee projectile or something like that. I don't know. It's an option. Something to think about if you want, after everything I've just shown you. But I am doing it this way. So if the current animation is not melee, we're going to play the melee animation, and then we are going to check if the melee hitbox.is colliding. We are going to say var colliders equal melee hitbox dot get collision count. I think it only collides with one thing, to be honest. And then I'm going to loop through for C. I guess it can collide with more. I don't know. I'm just covering my bases. For C in colliders, var target is equal to melee hitbox dot get collider, and this takes an index, which is going to be C. And so that's our target. So then we're just going to go through our typical damage check. So if target dot is in group, bracket capital target, and whoops, and target dot has method hit successful. Then I am going to, oh my goodness, can't get anything right, can I? Then I am going to hit successful dot emit. I'm going to get the direction of our hit, which is going to be equal to the target dot global transform dot origin minus, and this will just be the player, so I'll type owner.globalTransform. The owner will give you the ultimate parent of the node, so we're pretty deep in the node tree, but owner will give you the kinematic body, or the character body 3D. So owner.globalTransform transform dot origin, and then we'll normalize that vector. So that should give us the direction to the the object that we just hit, and then the position, which will be the position of where we made the hit. So it'll be melee hitbox dot get collision point. C. Okay, and this is mostly just for physics stuff. And then you want to call target dot hit successful. I'm going to copy and paste because I am lazy as heck today. So to be current weapon dot melee damage direction position. Okay, and that should work. Let's hit play. And it does not. Or okay, so if you're ever having trouble with stuff like this, the answer is probably you forgot to set up the collision masks. But also, you can tick debug, so under debug, tick visible collision shapes, that'll help us out. Now this will need to mask the objects and the objects, yes, because we don't have an enemy layer. So it'll just be objects, that's what both the targets and the rigid body are on. So now you can see it does emit here, and I can strike it, and it does do damage. And so now this is a little bit better, it's a little bit more generous. So if the player was trying to strike something and they were a little bit off, you'd still get a hit. You still need to be like looking at it because it is an object that exists in 3D space. You can't sort of like cheese it, but I don't know if you can collide with two objects. You can, okay, so that's a bit, we don't really need to collide with the world, we just need to collide with objects. We don't need to do damage to the world. Even if you want to do damage, you shouldn't do damage to the world, you've got to be nice to it. And why aren't these working? They must just be on the world layer, which might be a good time to set up an enemy layer for these. They are indeed just on the world layer, so I'm going to create a layer number 6. I'll do this in the actual scene. They could also just be on the object layer, but I think this is better for the project overall. So down, undo 3D physics. Enemy. This is it. Okay, it can be plural, it doesn't matter. And then the player character's melee collision mask will need to be 6 for enemies. And the shotgun projectile as well. Well, not the shotgun, the physics bullet. I know what I'm talking about, guys, don't worry. I'm a trained professional. Totally trained professional. Just not a trained professional in the art of game development in a completely different field, and I just happen to really like making games. It's not important, don't worry about it. Obviously that's still gonna work because it's a hit scan and these get detected. Geez, I had to strike them a couple of times. Give me a rigid body projectile weapon. Still works, yeah, awesome. Okay, I think we've done it, guys. We've made a shotgun. This probably is gonna be a really long tutorial. I'm pretty sorry about that. I think I might try to make a shotgun standalone video just so that you don't have to have the prerequisite of the project and like half an hour of me just copying and pasting code over because I'm refactoring the project as well. Like it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I might look into do that as well. I've got a lot of other things going on, so I'm trying to post more often. You know, I haven't been like as consistent as I was towards the end of the last year, but you know, things are picking up and you know, things are going really well for the channel, so that's really good. Anyway, I'm not expecting a lot of views on this one, so if you did stick around to the end, I really appreciate it. Yeah, you made a shotgun. I'll load this into the repo so that if you don't want to watch me do this for like an hour, then you can just download the repo and that'll be good. Anyway, I'll see you guys some other time.